Welcome to this week's episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm the host, Eric Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to share their stories. I hope you'll support tonight's guest. As for myself, I'm a father, author, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to see some of my creative works, my novels, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks for joining us tonight, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. So tonight I'm super happy to have Matthew Quirk on the program. Hey Matthew, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I know our paths electronically crossed somehow through social media. It took a little while to connect on this, but glad to have you on the program and talk about your novels and also your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So to start with, though, when I was looking at your bio a little bit closer, so I know something and I'm not coming in too blind, live in San Diego.
Yes.
I was watching Torrey Pines yesterday, so I thought of you. I'm like,
Oh,
hey.
yeah. It's Farmer. I've been so up to my eyeballs in like pub day craziness and mop up that I haven't been paying attention. But I mean, I feel bad being in San Diego right now when the rest of the country's in a few inches of snowcrete.
Yeah, we got about 6 inches at my house, and I think that was the most snow in this area in 12 years, they said.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, there was snow in Memphis, I
Yeah.
think.
And in Texas or Nashville in particular and Tennessee just got really hammered the week before with the ice storm.
Yeah, it's wild.
And
Yeah.
that got us too. We've still I had some of my ground was still covered in ice. I just kept crossing my fingers saying just don't let the power go out.
Yeah, yeah.
And last week the ice storm would have been a little better because I didn't have my kids that weekend. My daughter wasn't with me, so I can huff it out a little better. But when you got a 14-year-old girl who likes it warm, that would have
Yeah.
been a little bit harder.
That's tough. Yeah. Well, I mean, shoveling warms you up, but
I shoveled a driveway for the on Saturday for the first time in, oh man, probably 8 or 9, 10 years. I don't remember the last time I had to shovel an actual driveway. So
yeah, yeah. We lose a lot of good. We lose a lot of good soldiers to the shoveling.
we had talked offline. You thought I was in Connecticut because I grew up there, and yeah, I mean I used to make side money by shoveling driveways when I was
Yeah,
in high school and junior high, and I will definitely say every now and then on CBS, I can't remember the call sign for the CBS station, but yeah, during some of the storms, you'd hear about a couple people just their tickers didn't take too well to the shoveling
yeah,
that
yeah. It's
storm.
like if you just went from like your sedentary life to going and doing like a Murph CrossFit thing. That's how hard it is. Yeah,
Right, exactly. So my dad's how old's my dad? 71 now, 72, I think 71. He just actually had reached out to me the other day and I said, I gotta go shovel. And they had gotten 18 inches of snow the week before. And so he's like, well, just be careful. You're not as young as I'm 49, Dad. Come on.
yeah.
I go to the gym multiple times
You
a
got to
week.
warm up. You got to warm up though. Yeah, can't lose you.
I survived. Yeah,
Okay,
my funding is necessary for multiple resources. So yeah, I got to stay in the game. So
more than that. Yeah, yeah,
and I don't tell them how much life insurance is. I always play that down and be like,
yeah, yeah.
if I'm
You
gone,
don't
you're
want to
screwed.
get your incentives crossed there.
Yeah. Well, especially with a daughter, she might be like, "Hey, how much are you worth?" Be like,
Yeah, all of a sudden you're in like a black comedy. Yeah.
"Yeah." She's like, "You want a cup of tea, Dad?" And I'm like, "But you never make me tea. What's in this thing?"
Oh no.
No, nothing like that. So, yeah, no, survived the storm. Actually, the snowplow actually came down my road, which my road was fairly dry by today, but it came down a couple times and they're finally doing the secondary roads. And yeah, we always want it here in the South. And then when you get, or not always but my family always wants to get the snow in the South. Plenty of people don't. And once it comes, then you're kind of like, I'm good. I'm good with you live in
Yeah,
paradise. I always have told people over the years,
they're
like, where
nice.
would you like to live? And San Diego is one of my favorite places. I used to go there a lot for work. Like San Diego, I think I could handle,
It's pretty
10
great.
months of the year of San Diego.
It's
So
pretty great. Yeah. And you can drive an hour and at times find snow or drive
yeah.
5 hours and go some great skiing. So yeah, I'm very
Well,
fortunate.
like we were talking about a second ago with Torrey Pine. So I played Torrey three times over the years. And every time I there, I'd kind of like pinch myself and be like, oh man,
It's really nice.
this is where Tiger played. You know, this is
It, yeah,
this.
and that area is just it's really a beautiful spot.
Yeah. So before we get into your background, what brought you? Are you from Southern California, or what brought you there? If not,
No, I'm a kind of a mid-Atlantic guy like you.
okay,
Grew up in, I guess Connecticut's more New England, but I grew up in New Jersey
gotcha.
and then went to school in the Boston area
Mhm.
and then worked in DC for the Atlantic. And then
Okay.
my wife had worked out here in our neighborhood where we ended up when she was like 24 on a political campaign and
Hmm.
then moved back to DC. And she
Okay.
was like, huge mistake. I got to get back to San Diego. So once she and I, we were married, she was working for a small nonprofit that was in the Virginia mountains, probably not too far from you,
Okay.
in Blacksburg,
Yeah, absolutely. Know the
or
area.
maybe kind of your general vibe out there, maybe.
Hmm.
And and then once the books came together, she said, "Do you want to try out San Diego?" So we came, we tried it out. We've been trying it out for I don't know, 14 years or something.
It's still working for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you got a good location. I mean, I guess you could say if you travel a lot, the middle America is better because then you don't have long trips across. But if you're not going across too often, my headquarters, or not headquarters, but my boss actually is in the Bay Area. So there was quite a few years that I was doing that trip a couple times, every couple months. There was a period I was going every month to San
Mm.
Fran. So I'd be flying like Atlanta or local and then over to Atlanta to San Fran once a month. And yeah, those things were, and I'd always take the red eye coming
Yeah,
home.
worked it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that way I could see my kids and not miss another whole day at
Mm.
home.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you're like a zombie. I get home at like 8 in the morning and everyone's like, "Oh, Dad's home and want to play," and you're just like, "Ah, what time can I go to bed?"
What? Yeah. And I get that. I would occasionally, and I was very fortunate, I'd occasionally be sent on a book tour where it was like new city every day for 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And you get off the plane, you check in for the next flight,
Yep.
and then you're just you feel a little bit like you've been drinking every day, even if if I drank on those things, I'd be completely wiped out because it's very draining. But I was fortunate to have that kind of support.
Yeah, good problem to have, but it's
Yeah.
still, with anything like that, it still wears you down. So people that never get to have a book tour, they're like, "Oh, I wish I could have a book tour. No one should ever complain." Well, then you go on one for 2 straight weeks and you realize, kind of the process you're having to do each day and the travel's not glamorous. I love traveling. Hopefully I will to the day I die and I don't get to do enough of it. But when you're doing it for work and when you're doing it a lot, you realize that the folks that don't do it and go, "Oh, you get to travel," you're like, hotels and airports all look identical. They're not that
Yeah,
glamorous.
yeah, and I mean now we have a 3-year-old, so I'm lucky to stay at home and just get to do a lot of like pickups and tuck-ins and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
Yeah,
you don't want to miss those because
no,
that's a hard, I don't know, as someone my son's 19 now, second semester in college, my
oh
daughter's in high school. Now looking back on those times when they were little, I did appreciate it. I did enjoy them, but it went by so quick that now it's kind of like, oh man, I wish I could kind of bottle those memories and
yeah,
have those, be able to, something on a bottle and open up like, oh, that's what that was like. Oh,
yeah,
that's
and that's what I remember when I'm like cleaning up some throw up or something, or
it's a
like
little,
being punched.
right. Or not sleeping at night.
She's feisty, so like everyone has their feisty moments, but I'll just remember like I'll be missing the pitter patter of these feet one day, so
Yeah.
I'll soak it
Which
up while I can.
which is then people have grandkids, and then I obviously don't have any, but I have a few friends that do, and they're like, "Well, that's the fun stuff," because then they come hang out. You spoil them. You're like, "Hey, Grandpa's got some chocolate for you and some
Yeah,
Coca-Cola," and
and they hand
you
them
don't got to
back.
put them to bed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They're not waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning at your house throwing up
yeah.
all over the floor. So no, that's a great time of life. So one of the things I definitely want to dive into for your background is um, the desire or going to Harvard. Obviously, Harvard has pretty reputable place to go. What was the impetus to go there, and what was that process like for you?
Well, I it was a little funny because my family, everyone kind of grew up in New York and New Jersey,
Hmm.
so. And then I did really well in school. My parents had a great culture of kind of education. So my
Okay.
mom finished her undergrad when I was in middle school
Mm.
and then went straight to get her master's in English. And it
Wow.
was a really wonderful influence because, it'd be like mom is disappearing for the weekend, and
Mm.
you're just going to hear the sound of the Selectric IBM from behind her door because she's locked herself up with the plays of William Butler Yeats for the weekend.
Yep.
And dad's getting pizza and we're cleaning up. So it was really cool.
Mm.
And then my dad, he got his doctorate when I was um, in elementary school. So it was just like a great culture of education.
Okay.
But, now I sort of know there's different vibes to these schools. And, I know like Brown, if you want to be kind of like an artsy hippie, that's like a very Brown thing,
Mm.
and like Columbia has its own thing. So, but I didn't know. So we just did like one long tour
Okay.
and we fit too much in. So, I'd go and I went to Brown and it was like too hilly, and you just see like one weird looking person outside the Harvard dining hall. You'd be like, too many weird looking people here. So, but yeah, so I applied everywhere
Mm.
and then Harvard admitted me early action, and it's kind of hard to say no.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I went and I had been really good at kind of science
Hmm.
and I did a lot of different stuff, but like I started in chemistry physics there and I
Okay.
got a scholarship from the Navy for some different like science competitions I had won.
Mm.
So that was kind of my the thing where I really stood out in high school. So it
Right.
was and then I caught the writing bug. So
Okay.
it was a very challenging thing to be set on that path
Hmm.
and then to say, to heck with it, I'm going to switch to English.
Right. And you switched while you'd already started in
Yeah,
Harvard.
I did my freshman year. I was a chemistry and
Freshman.
physics
Okay.
major, and it was, it was one of those things like I got there and because those are such, they're built on foundations. And I
Yes.
got there and I had taken all the AP classes I could.
Mm.
I went to a public school in New Jersey, and my
Mm.
mom was a journalism teacher, an English
Okay.
teacher at that school. And I showed up, and this happens to a lot of people when they go there or like at different phases of their life.
Hmm.
I was not the smartest kid anymore. And there were kids who had gone to like some high school in Colorado. It's like the High School of Mines or something.
Interesting. Okay.
And they had been taking AP calculus courses when they were 12.
Yeah.
And they were wild, And then other kids
You
were
had like
coming
young
from
Sheldon there basically. So
yeah, yeah. And other kids who were coming out of the Soviet rocket schools. I mean, at that point it was Russia, but like these
right.
were these were literally the smartest people in the world.
That's funny.
And it was really daunting. And
Yeah.
so there was that. And then I caught the writing bug in a major, major way. Um, and then because I just came from kind of a practical background and I'm a practically minded person, it was scary for me to switch to English. I thought I'd never make a living.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's funny. My son's I said freshman in college, and he's actually a music major. Uh, music his emphasis is in bluegrass, but it's music production. So they
Oh,
basically
cool.
teach you the whole.
Yeah,
He's in Tennessee, and they kind of give you the whole gamut where you could run the soundboard, you could be a tour manager. You're gonna get your hands in all the whole
yeah.
pot basically. Well, one of his friends who one of my closest friends, our sons were in the scouts together. His son's going for engineering. And so he's at NC State, which has a really solid engineering program. And when he was telling me this after the fact, they're in their orientation program and the parents are there and the kids are there. And they said during the orientation, they're like, most you kids haven't had to study very hard. You're top of your class. You're going to engineering. You think you're the SHIT is what you are. They're
Yeah,
like, welcome to college. If you don't apply yourself, if you don't dive into this head first, you flunk out. And kids are kind of like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, his son got halfway through the semester just like calculus was kicking his butt. And
yeah,
and so my friend said to his son, he said, go to the teacher every time there's an opportunity to go over the lesson in their office hours and go figure it out because you can't get any further in the program if you don't do solid on this class.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
had his wake up of like, yeah, you came from a little rural, not rural, not too rural, but little Western North Carolina town, and all of a sudden you're not the big fish anymore. You're the little minnow in a really big pond.
Yeah. I mean, it can be kind of wonderfully clarifying
Sure.
because if you're doing things just because you were the best at them,
Right.
um, so it's like a kind of externally directed, I'm sure there's better language for that. And then all of a sudden that's pulled out from you. And
Yeah.
then you say, well, what do you really want to do? And I really wanted to write.
Yeah.
So I
Was there
yeah.
a class at Harvard or was there something that kind of flipped that switch for you, do you think?
Yeah, there was a couple things. So it was actually the summer, I think the summer before my freshman year, the science stuff had brought me to London.
Okay.
And so I was like this 18-year-old pretentious brainiac in London. And I was just like walking around, drinking beer because I could drink beer there.
You're the
And
man.
where like T.S. Eliot had gone, and I was reading all the T.S. Eliot. So I was just like in the full thrall of
Yeah.
like youthful pretension. Um, and then I had a class. It was a kind of like what did they call them? Core. It's kind of a gen ed class, but
Hmm.
it's a really good class. And it was like it was Proust and it was Joyce and some other folks. And the professor was great. And I wrote a paper and one of the TAs gave it to the professor.
Hmm.
And this is when I wanted to English, but I didn't know if I was any good.
You
And
figure, yeah.
he read part in front of the class.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, and just as a practical matter, I was like, well, maybe I have the knack for some of this stuff. And
Right.
a similar thing happened my sophomore year when I got into some of the fiction workshops there.
Okay.
But that was all literary fiction. And it turned out I wasn't great at that, and it doesn't suit me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating as I think so often, especially when we're younger, we have this ideal of like maybe what our career will be. And then once we actually start, well, the male brain doesn't develop fully to what, 26, 28.
I'm still working on it.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, I'm 49. I'm
Yeah.
probably at about a 12-year-old capacity of development at this point. So, um, but you start down a path and then you realize sometimes, okay, this isn't what's, kind of lighting my fire. And, and I think that's the wonderful thing about life is you have the opportunity to pivot
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
most
And I used to be like really intense because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And I'd
part.
be like, I have to pick the exact thing. And then it's
Right.
just like you got to pick the next right thing, really make a go. And
Yep.
that, like in terms of what happened to me, like at the end of college, I thought it was kind of a wash, but then I
Hmm.
like lucked into a job at the Atlantic,
Yep.
and then I got laid off from the Atlantic in the financial crisis.
Okay.
And then like within days of that, I heard back on my first book, and that didn't work out. But then
Hmm.
like the next book, the 500, turned into a huge deal. So
Gotcha.
all these times I felt like I was like really pursuing something,
Yeah.
and and then I felt like it was falling apart. All of a
Hmm.
sudden something came
Something came.
from a
Yeah.
different direction, and it
Right.
worked out. The Night Agent came together at a time in my career when I was like having a rough time because I had to rewrite a book really
Hmm.
quickly. Like it kind of my nerves were shot for a while. So
Okay.
things have a funny way of working out.
Yeah,
I
they
just
really
keep my
do.
head down.
Well,
And
it's another example too, though, of sometimes when you plan it, like, okay, I'm going to do this, and it doesn't work out. What, especially in the writing process, what happens? It's so demoralizing when people don't achieve what they think they're supposed to achieve. And for many people, that's their stopping point. Like, okay, I didn't get an
yeah.
agent, or I didn't get a traditional publishing deal, or I got a deal, I got a two-book deal. My first book sold okay, and my second book tanked, and I was done after two books. And it's
Oh
really
yeah, yeah,
hard.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to
Yeah, because
sometimes find that motivation.
if you get a giant first deal and then you don't have super giant numbers,
Yeah.
that could be the end. I mean, you're
Yeah,
very lucky to get it. I'm counting my gratitude. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, so you just and it's something to generalize a little bit. It's like a valuable life thing to fail a few times,
Hmm.
realize it won't kill you, and like some of the people who, these kind of A-type perfectionist people who have always done well and they
Yep.
got themselves into a certain thing that's like it's got a ladder to it. So if you always do what you're supposed to, you keep rising up that ladder. And they've
Mhm.
never really failed. And if the first time you fail, you're like 30 or 40, you fail pretty hard.
Yeah, you really
And you
do.
don't know you'll bounce back.
Right.
So it could be a pretty shocking thing. So it's nice to step on some rakes on the way,
Yeah,
all along
absolutely.
the way.
Well, you fail in your 30s and 40s, you most typically have a marriage or had a marriage,
Yeah,
have
no, and
kids,
there's kids. It's much more
mortgage.
consequential.
You have
Yeah,
all
yeah,
these responsibilities that
yeah,
it's just like, okay, I can't just go be a greeter at Walmart and
yeah.
pay my car payment and my mortgage payment.
Yeah, no, it's much more
So
consequential. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And we were talking a little bit offline. I've got a full-time job. So for me, I love writing. I love the process, putting those books out, getting to hold, my latest book in my hand. Actually, right before we filmed this, I got all my author copies. So I filmed a quick video
Oh, fun.
of opening that. I'll put it out tomorrow. Super great thing, but I don't have to have those go to 100,000 households to let me keep my lifestyle next year. I don't have to have that external pressure,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
in a way is great because it kind of lets you have that joy of doing it. But at the same time, there's the flip side of the coin where you can say, man, when you have the pressure, maybe you'll try harder, maybe you'll try too hard, of course, but maybe
Yeah.
you'll be really hungry, and hungry is maybe when success will come.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer that some of my best books have been where my back's against the wall because I really don't like that
Right.
day-to-day texture.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I talk about this when I'm giving kind of craft talks, and there's a lot of folks who are in the earlier stages of their career, where it's kind of nice, to have the day job, to
Hmm.
not have a ton of pressure on the writing, and to be able to do it just for the satisfaction and
Yeah,
joy of
for the
it.
love. Yeah.
It's the way, like, I play tennis. I'm not very good. I love it. And then I go to a tennis tournament here with the pros,
Right.
and like you see them, and it's hard to watch how much pressure they put on themselves.
Right.
And they're like, I mean, you just want to give them a hug. They're just like,
I know.
they're like smashing rackets. So, yeah, do what you love. This is in the method, actually. Do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. And then
Mhm.
I think I kept this line, and it's like, but then once what you love becomes your job, it gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's where I think so many times people get what they think is what they want, and they realize it's kind of a letdown. And I think writing especially is a good parallel to that because I mean I busted my ass to get my first book out. I loved every second of holding that book, and I remember that. I mean, I remember it's behind me on the shelf. Um, I teared up for the first month every time I picked it up and held it, and I
Yeah.
said, "Man, I worked for this." I can pick up that same book now and be like, yeah, cool. Put it down a second later and never give, not be like, I need to pick it back up. It's like, no, I got something, but that doesn't sustain me to keep pushing me forward. It's the next thing. And what I try to remind people is so often they're stuck with in their mind, it's the destination. I've got to get to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
level and then I'll have joy. And it's like, it's the journey. And if you don't find the joy in that journey, that destination is not going to fulfill you.
Yeah, yeah, because it's the treadmill, and this isn't novel, but like
Yeah,
if you're going for these external rewards and validations, like you're never going to be happy
right.
because there's always going to be somebody ahead of you.
Yep.
Or, it's like that Twilight Zone, I think, where the guy's the biggest pool player in the world.
Okay.
Uh, and even if you somehow win the lottery and get to the top, then you're like, oh no, I have to stay at the top,
You have to stay
you
at the
know?
top.
So
Yeah.
I mean, for me, since I was 18 and fell in love with writing, it's that I love writing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I do get caught up and I'm like, oh, I need this book to do well.
Sure. Human nature. Absolutely.
I'm gonna really do everything I can to get it out in the world. And it's good because I was kind of, especially with this book, I was like, it was a special book for me. So
Hmm.
I really wanted to get it out to people. But um, at the same time, it's nice for writing itself to be such an absorbing thing that I love to do because I can
Hmm.
always just get lost in that and regardless of the outcome,
Yeah.
there's a satisfaction in itself.
Absolutely, there is. Um, Before we get into the actual writing, talk about what it was like. So going to, Harvard, Ivy League school, and then jumping into the world of journalism, especially, and this was obviously several years ago that you were actively doing it, but now, I don't know, man, there's the internet's changed everything. And when it comes to journalism, especially, anyone, like podcasting, anyone with a microphone can spout their opinion and people might think, oh, they're correct. So everyone in some degree online can act like a journalist.
Mhm.
You actually, though, performed it as a job. What was that like? And especially being in DC, which some
Hmm.
people would say, the heart of politics and the just the crux of power. What was it like from a journalist perspective?
It was really cool, and especially the age, because I went there between, I think, my sophomore and junior year for my internship,
Oh, okay.
and then I think I did a second internship. I might have the dates a little wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe it was between my junior and senior year, and then I went back. But I was young, and
Hmm.
it's like, when you're very impressionable, and it was this big hole in my knowledge
Right.
because I studied history and literature, and everything stopped at World War II, if we even made
Hmm.
it that far.
Right.
And then, I got dropped into DC with all these debate nerds and like kids who had grown up, kids of journalists grown up in DC. And, I got to this baptism by fire, not only in the subject matter of what's happening in the world and, knowing about Iranian militias and,
Hmm.
healthcare and everything. But also it was the run up to the Iraq War. So
Okay.
there were spies running around. And
Yeah.
my friends who wrote about that stuff, you go to somebody's house for like beer, for a couple beers and listen to records. And there were like Iranian spies there who were like trying to get their people featured and in tight with the, certain DC policy elites so their guy would be
Sure.
put in charge of Iraq. And it was
Yeah.
like, it was so cool. And the owner of the Atlantic, a wonderful guy named David Bradley, and like a fascinating, larger than life guy.
Hmm.
Um, he he had just bought the magazine. He was really nice to the younger staff, so he would have me and some other folks to his house. But his house was like, I think, the former Cuban embassy.
Oh, wow.
It was this mansion on Embassy
On
Row,
MC Row,
or
yeah.
in on the Georgetown side of, but next to all these embassies.
Hmm.
And he would have these old school salons that you would hear about, kind of like in the Kennedy administration.
Yeah.
And it would be like me, a 20-year-old idiot, and then the former CIA director, and then a national political columnist and a war correspondent, and they'd
Right.
be debating whether the US should be an imperial power. And I was just,
Yeah.
and it was great because it fired my imagination. And
Absolutely.
that actually fired me up. It brought me back to the thrillers I had grown up on,
Hmm.
and the foreign intrigue and the political intrigue.
Yeah.
And because I'd always had the writing habit, but then I found the material that it was really
Right.
well suited to. So it was really, at the time I was like, oh, why aren't they giving me more features in the magazine?
Hmm.
But the frustration spilled over into writing, and that turned out to be a wonderful thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, just being in that nexus of power. So I lived in Richmond. We were talking about Virginia
Oh
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
while ago. So I lived in Richmond for how many long I lived there? About 5 years. I think about 5 years I lived there. 4 to 5 years I lived in Richmond. So we'd go up to DC with some frequency. Like now, this is before I even lived in Richmond. I actually went up for Bush's for George W. H.W. Not H.W. Sorry,
Okay.
George W.'s first inauguration. I actually got
Yeah.
tickets. I lived in South Carolina at the time, and I got tickets from Strom Thurmond. Not from him, but went to his office.
Yeah.
Got 'em. I had been to DC a lot at that point, even in college, and because I just where I grew up and traveling. Um, Very unique experience to be in DC for really the changing of power. And
Yeah.
then 4 years later, he gets in for a second term. I had no interest to go. Where after 9/11 at that point, and DC had just a different. So I was there, pre and post
Mhm.
9/11 quite a lot. It
That's
had
when I
a,
was there.
yeah, it had such a
Yeah.
different feel.
It was like Fortress America. Yeah.
Yeah, Fortress, absolutely. So, my mom actually got tickets for his second inauguration. She was like, "Hey, would you go?" And I'm like, "I don't really want to go," but she goes, "Well, I don't want to go by myself, and you've been there, you know the city really well."
Yeah.
So I went. It was a very it was not a pleasant experience. I hate to say it. It had such a different vibe on it. And there was actually one spot we were gonna go watch part of the motorcade going down Pennsylvania Ave, and one of our friends worked for the FBI, and she had told me before, hey, if there's any issues, security's gonna be a problem. Just call my cell, and I'll help if you get stuck somewhere where you can't find a
Yeah,
way
yeah.
around the barriers or whatever. Because our tickets weren't anything special. Yeah, so I ended up calling her at one point because I couldn't figure out how to even get to places because the security was so tight. And then we were going down the road, which was closed off, and all of a sudden, this sea of people are running towards us. Never figured out what happened. There was never anything on the news, didn't hear any explosions or anything. But I just told my mom, go that way. We're moving away from this group. And it was just
Yeah.
one of those memories again of being there and being like, and so after that, people would be like, oh, you've been twice. Would you go to another one? I said, the only way I go to another inauguration is I'm not obviously I'm not putting my hand on a Bible. I'm not president, but I'm like in a VIP section where I'm going to enjoy myself and not have to fight all the security and all the other stuff and stand out here with, a 500,000 people in the cold. I'm like, I think I'm good. I've done it twice. Okay,
Yeah,
I
and
lived the
a lot of
experience.
DC stuff is like that. And when I write DC books or any sort of book that's kind of set in a rarefied world, I I try to strike a balance that gets at exactly what you noticed, like with the inauguration, where
Yeah.
from the outside, if you've never done it, it's like it's this really cool thing. And then inside it can be very mundane.
Yeah.
When I'm writing the White House or the Situation Room, you want to get that like real kind of
The authenticity.
that feeling you get when you're that close to power, which is like
Yeah.
really striking. And especially when I was young, I absorbed all that. And then
Hmm.
you also want to convey the how everyday it is, you know.
Yeah.
But like when there's a show and it's like somebody like razzing the FBI director or something, or like
Right.
it's hard to convey um, all these the hierarchy of power in DC. And
Hmm.
when you get into that room and you're in your 20s and you're standing against the wall, like how amazing that is.
Yeah.
So different. There's a different um, world and different reality to each show or
Sure.
book, but
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
always something I try to do to
Yeah.
get that lived in feeling, because it's really nice to get that authentic experience of it. And then part of that is getting how special and kind of awe-inspiring some
Hmm.
of these places are, even if you aren't a fan of the people in them at any given moment, which comes up
Correct.
a lot with the Secret Service stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you've run into in your books.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Well, I was gonna say the one story I had to that too is I was 17 years old out visiting my grandmother who was staying out in Palm Springs for the winter. And she ended up taking me to the well, at the time was the Bob Hope Invitational, which was played out there in Palm Springs. Super, super amazing experience, actually. Well, we're with my uncle Elmar. Elmar knew everybody. So we're walking up to one of the tee boxes and he's like, "Oh, I got someone for you to meet." I'm like, oh, who am I meeting? He's like, President Ford. Ford, this is the cool. I'm
Yeah,
17
yeah,
years old. I'm a history geek. I'm like the coolest thing. So, I don't know what's going to happen. I see the president there in the tee box. I see the Secret Service guys next to him. And my uncle knew him somehow. I probably knew the story years ago of how his friendship was with President Ford. But yeah, he walks up to him. Secret Service didn't give him a hard time. Slaps him on the shoulder, part in the back. Is like, "Hey Jerry, how's it going?" And I'm like ready to drop to the ground. It's like they're gonna
yeah,
start shooting us. What are you doing? And so I got to meet him, got to talk to him. Super amazing experience. But then it kind of impressionable. And then I'm kind of like, okay, he's just a normal guy. He's just in
yeah,
this he got in this really unique role of life that only 40 something at the time or less than that at his time have actually been in.
yeah. And
But
he could have destroyed the world, one command if he
with
wanted to. Yeah,
One little suitcase, he could have
yeah,
been
yeah,
flipped it open and been like, break the
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think that's part of that, not just that experience, but part of kind of watching that over the years really then fed my fire. So, and I don't always write about DC, and I won't always write about DC, but that can be really fun stuff just to explore, explore the facts and put the fiction spin in it. That's always super enjoyable for me because you can kind of make your own world. You can make these people hopefully completely authentic, but sometimes you have to make them devious. It's like, man, if I was that person, if I was the body man, if I was the night agent, if I was whatever this role is, what would I do? What would I want? How would I want things to work out? How would I put myself in a situation where I can maybe have a say in what's happening? So, it's kind of a neat experience.
Yeah, yeah, and it's nice to get those characters who are sort of a way in, a relatable way in. Like the night agent is a real
Yeah.
person. I had a friend who had a similar job,
Okay.
and it's a real thing where you could be a relatively low level person. Yeah, the watch officers in the Situation Room are actually like full on mid career experts.
Right.
They're not like 20 something
Yeah.
um, kids, but like you could have somebody who's very junior, especially considering the national security apparatus. Like,
Yes.
normally you're getting stuff from generals and so
Right.
on. Are briefing the president in the middle of like a Cuban Missile Crisis
Hmm.
kind of situation, and all of a sudden it's just the two of them because it's
Yeah.
it's jumping off and they've woken him up and brought him down.
Right. And you're having this say possibly in what can alter the world.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
hopefully you're a subject matter expert or acting like one.
yeah. I mean, sometimes they're not. So it's
Yeah.
it's. I mean, and then you call everyone, and then they get the NSC together. But or that's how it went. I think the current administration does things. They're. I don't know if they're using the full NSC process. So it's like it's kind of interesting.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows what's currently happening. And it's the world's trying taken an interesting turn, put it that way. So,
Yes.
as good and bad as that might be. But writing wise, so what was the process for you to get the first book published? Did you write several before you got published,
Mhm.
or off the gate did you get one?
So I had a book that I was working on forever, and it was like me figuring out the kind of thing I should write
Hmm.
by rewriting the same book over and over again.
Okay, and
So
you were
just
doing this
working on
while
it
you were a
forever.
reporter?
Yeah, yeah. So it was
Okay,
like nights and weekends. And
yeah.
and then I thought, because my personality, I was kind of like the funny guy. And I wasn't like the action thriller guy. You've
Hmm.
met the guys who are like they're pilots
Yeah.
and they spend the weekend shooting and doing karate and they're like, yeah, you
Right.
should write a thriller.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really my thing so much. So I started, writing like DC stuff, and it was like Christopher Buckley or maybe Evelyn Waugh, and then
Hmm.
um I couldn't really plot it. So I added kind of a thriller plot to it.
Okay.
And then all this stuff from work was coming in, so I added more of that international intrigue. And then I would
Hmm.
give it to people, and they'd say, these thriller action parts and intrigue parts are way better than
Hmm.
the social satire stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so I would, slowly worked it that way, and it just took me a long time to write it.
Yeah.
And then I used that to get an agent, and we threw that book out. Which is very common, but it was like
Sure.
the end of the world at the time because I'd
Oh
read
yeah.
6 years in on this book.
Right.
And but at that point you're ready.
You're
Um,
ready not to ever read it again, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah.
When
You're
you
like, just tell me. Just tell me. It's like you don't want to live in the house that you learned how to build houses with.
exactly. You
Um,
want to sell that thing.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then I wrote another book in 9 months, the
Okay.
500, and that
Hmm.
turned into a really big deal, a shockingly big deal, because um, the kind of fun story is, I got laid off. A couple days later, I got my first professional feedback
Hmm.
on my thriller writing, and it was from
Hmm.
a very big deal agent.
Okay.
And it's sort of, I'd given it to a friend, and she'd given it to a junior agent there. I didn't know it was going to the big deal agent. And he
Hmm.
said, keep going. And I said, great, this is the first professional feedback.
Hmm.
And then my wife and I got engaged, my now wife, And so that kind of put a deadline on the writing thing.
Right.
And I was just like living off of no money.
Yeah.
Um, but I was in my 20s, it was fine. And it didn't feel fine.
Yeah, it
It
didn't
felt like the end of the
exactly.
world. Yeah. Um, and then a month before the wedding, we sold the 500 in a
Okay.
really big deal, and then the film rights. And
Gotcha.
it was so great that I thought maybe I just have had like a psychotic break and was
Hmm.
imagining it because it was like delusionally what you dream of happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you talk to a lot of authors, and then everything was easy ever since.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah,
Once you
yeah,
get,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
like you were saying too, it for and you put your time in obviously by that point. It wasn't like your first book because you'll hear someone every now and then that they submit their first book, they get an agent, relatively quickly, and then that book goes out, for submission, and they start having a bidding war on it, and then Hollywood comes, and all of a sudden their first book is a seven-figure deal, and they get all these things, and for a majority of people, and in some certain situations, you did just hit the lotto. But it's that danger of can you got to be able to do it a second time. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
just have that be the one because and if that one does take off, that's wonderful. The publisher's going to love you, but the second one's got to do just as good.
yeah,
It
yeah,
doesn't they don't want the downward trend. It needs
yeah.
to go up.
And I mean, in case it wasn't clear, like when I said everything was easy since then, I was being very
It's
sarcastic. Not
sarcastic.
not like a
Absolutely. No,
snarky
no, no, I
sarcasm,
know. I know.
but it's like when you're like doing some serious hiking and you're like, oh, that must be the top.
Yeah.
Then you get there. Yeah. So yeah, if you get that big deal, then there's an incredible amount of pressure. And the publishers like the debuts and publishing, as I understand it, I'm not in like, the executive chair at a publisher, but they
Hmm.
place a lot of bets on people. And 95% of them don't pay off.
Don't pay off. Yeah.
But then you get Twilight and you're good for 20 years.
Right.
So, it's and this is another thing I tell people in like craft talks and stuff. I'm like, debuts, you're great. You don't have a track. You're not
Yeah.
fighting a track.
Right.
Um, and before people had tracks, there was no book scan. So it was just like your reputation, and you could go
Right.
from publisher to publisher because they liked your books, and now your track matters a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can be a victim of your own success.
Be a victim of
And
exactly. Yeah.
I had the 500 did really well. It hit the list, but it didn't. I don't think it didn't launch me into kind of what they had hoped, which is like
Hmm.
constantly top of the list status. And then I was really I really had to fight to
Yeah.
kind of like, keep things going.
Sure. Absolutely.
So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. Yeah.
I know when I did Thriller Fest 3 years in a row, and I was hoping at the time I was hoping I'd be on the debut the next year or 2 years later or whatever, and it didn't happen at that point in my life. But they would the debut panel. I knew some people that went through it, and they're like, they're so excited. They're getting I'm totally drawing a blank on who talks to them there. It's a well-known author. Name will come to me in like 20 seconds or whatever. But yeah, at dinner that night, he sits down to them and tells them what it's really like. And basically, like, the vast majority of you will never get another book published and this and that, and just like kind of lays out the truth of
That's
the
rough.
industry.
That's
And
rough.
people come
Yeah.
out of there and they got to go in the next morning to the breakfast and like, put on a happy face. Well, the night before they just got told you're finished.
Wait, does this happen every year or
So it did back, I'm dating myself there. I went in
oh
17, 18, and 19. So
yeah.
it was at least happening around 17 and 18. Yes.
That's
Um,
why that's why the debuts are so fun because they have stars in their eyes and it's
yeah.
all wonderful and you don't want to be like a cynical old goat,
Right.
because it's just amazing. I'm so lucky to make a living at writing, but
Hmm.
it's there are a lot of challenges to it.
There are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's good to know. I would give him the year to not, to think it's all roses.
Before you
Yeah,
crush their soul.
yeah. A friend of mine, when I had the first book, he said, "You know what? People say the second book is hard, but the third book is hard." And my second book was hard, and I
Yeah.
kind of fumbled it. And and it was it led to a lot. I had to work really hard to sort of like,
Hmm.
keep things going. And I went back to him and I said, I thought you said the third book was the hard one. He goes, oh no, the second one's the hard one. I just tell people that so
Just
they
lie to
like,
them.
you'd rather not know you're walking into machine gun fire.
Yeah. Well, and the more you talk to authors that have been doing this for a while, I have never heard one say, "Oh, once you get to six, seven, eight, nine, you're on easy street." It's
Yeah,
everyone is your
yeah,
imposter syndrome kicks in. Is this gonna? Because you can create, and you better hope you better put something out or put your name on something that you believe in. But you can do this crazy thing and you know believe in it. But I tell you what, it might not be what you thought it was going to be, and you might not have the feedback you thought you were going to have, and at that point you've got to
well,
you've got to
just
just put
to
on your big boy pants and you've got to be ready to do it again.
yeah, and like, when you talk to some big name people, like some huge people,
I have, yeah,
and
absolutely.
they'll be like, you know, all this horrible stuff happened. This is a grind. And then the first time you hear that, you're like, there's no there's no Elysian fields here. We don't
Right.
just get to just like you know, relax. But I think that's helpful, or there's a way to
Mhm.
be helpful, or maybe I'm just being like naively optimistic. You can be like, hey, everybody's working.
Right.
Nobody's like taking it easy.
Hmm.
And so myself or someone in that position, when I was trying to break in,
Right.
somebody who's did their debut and then they're working on a second book, somebody who's at the top of the world, somebody who's kind of like landed a little mid list and is like,
Hmm.
calling their way, grinding their way up. Like, we're all in the same boat,
We're all the same.
So it's something reassuring that you're not like, oh, if I was just there. You see that the people at the very top are just as miserable as the rest of us. And
Brad Meltzer
yeah,
told me face to face years ago. He's like, "You're always hustling. You're always hustling.
yeah,
You think you're
and
not going to hustle, but you're going to have to hustle with every book."
yeah. So it's
Um,
nice because then everybody just puts their head down and gets to
Everyone
work.
puts their head down. So the method is it your fifth standalone? Fourth,
Boy.
fifth? Hold on.
Mm,
One, two. Yeah. We got the Night
yeah, it's my
Agent,
fifth. Yeah,
Power of
yeah, yeah.
Assassin, Red
Yeah.
Warning, Insider Threat. So tell our audience about the method. Kind of give them give them the elevator pitch, and we can try to. And then I would like to ask you how very briefly we can talk like the Night Agent, how that felt to see
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
actually make it to the screen. So.
Yeah. So the method was inspired by the Night Agent because I got to go on set.
Mhm.
I got to do a little cameo and see all the work the actors were putting in. I saw
Yeah.
Gabe Basso and stunt actor and Luciani do a fight scene, 30-second fight scene. It took nine
Mhm.
hours.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Right.
And so just it was such a cool experience.
Hmm.
And it when I'm around stuff, it fires me up
Yep.
and I absorb it. So I was like, oh, my mind started going and I might have had this idea kicking around in my files earlier, where an actress has to become as badass as the role
Hmm.
um, she plays. And it comes from that night agent set experience.
Okay.
Um, and also, I realize I'm flubbing the elevator pitch. I'm going on and on. So
That's okay.
you're getting the full method spiel here.
That's okay.
So, um, and I had some friends growing up in New Jersey. We were relatively close to New York, who
Hmm.
were theater and dance people who went on to some cool stuff in the stage. And so, seeing their experiences and a lot of them, I had a friend who was like in Phantom
Wow.
and she'd do Phantom and it's just so grandiose and she's doing ballet and she's
Hmm.
singing and it's the most incredible. And then she comes off and she's like, "You guys want to get a burger?" And it's so crazy how they switch and a lot of them are kind of like homebodies, even though they seem like the most glamorous people on earth.
Right. Yeah.
So that duality was interesting to
The
me.
duality. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially coming from spy stuff.
Hmm.
So from past spy books. So yeah, I the and here's the elevator pitch, it's what if an actor in order to survive had to become as lethal as the character she portrayed. And a lot of it came from seeing training. Like you see Keanu Reeves, like he can really shoot.
He's
Um,
really good shot. Yeah.
Gabe Basso, who plays Peter Sutherland in the Night Agent TV show,
Hmm.
he does a lot. He does an incredible amount of training. He's on some like very cool Spartan monk kick
Yeah.
and he's a really fascinating guy. And I saw a video somewhere of his trainer said that Gabe he's like, put me in a real fight. Can we do that? And he put him in a
Hmm.
real, I think, kickboxing or MMA fight against
Hmm.
like a guy who's a serious amateur. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's amateur. And Gabe went in there and he punched him in the kidneys twice, and the guy just fell down. Because Gabe, I mean, if you see him do stunts, he's a fearsome
He's
guy.
all in with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, all of that made it seem plausible that an actor could get into that kind of action. And it
Yeah.
was funny actually. I've read some folks who find that aspect implausible.
Right.
But I think, I mean, some of these people have done like years of
They have.
firearms and martial arts trainings.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. I found it pretty plausible, but
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
each their own, of course. Yeah. So that was the inspiration, and then the my friend's experience on stage. So it
Hmm.
was nice. It all went in there, and it was set in New York and New Jersey, which
Hmm.
is where I grew up, and these formative places. So it was a really fun book. It was a very personal book for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think it's kind of neat too, just ending on the night agent that you kind of got that idea from being on set, which most people that don't know anything all think you want to write a book, you want to get optioned, it's going to turn into something and all this. It's like you might get optioned, but to have
Oh
it
yeah,
actually materialize and become something is fairly rare. It's not super common that it happens.
yeah,
And then for you as an author to actually be any bit involved in the process, to be able to even go on set, that's also not super common. Everyone sees the Jack Carr now, which Jack's a great guy. I love Jack. But what happened with Jack is not what normally happens for an author. So for you to be able to have the
yeah,
access you had, that's still pretty unique in the film industry versus, being for the writer at least.
yeah. I mean, what you hear is that it's always a nightmare. Like everyone treats you horribly and cheats you and
Sure.
steals your idea. So, and I had, I think, probably a typical experience where and a very fortunate experience where I would get optioned and nothing would ever happen.
Okay.
Um, and when people talk about getting optioned, I don't know if most people know this. It's often a very small amount of money. Um,
Correct. Yes.
and then when you're asking somebody
Those
to make,
suitcases full of $100 bills, and we're
yeah,
going to bring
and then when
five
you're
more of these in the next couple days.
yeah, and then in terms of investment, and this only occurred to me as they made a show. Like
Mhm.
when when they want to make a TV show, they have to spend 2,000 times as much as that option.
Oh yeah,
Well, I might be messing up the math, but it's a lot of money.
a
A,
lot
a,
of money.
a season of TV costs 50 to 100 million
Right.
dollars,
Yeah, absolutely.
and they have to act out everything in the book and build it, and it's
Hmm.
just it's really it's incredible,
Yeah.
like literally incredible that they do this. So to actually have them make something, the conversion rate from option to green light is very small
Very
because you're
small.
you're asking somebody for 40, 50, $100 million.
Million
It's
dollars. Yeah.
really wild. Um,
And you got to go to the premiere as well, right? I think I remember seeing
yeah,
pictures of it
yeah,
online at the
yeah. It was
premiere.
our first date since we had a kid. So we're like, we should have gone out to dinner or something. We should have warmed up. We are
You're
very rusty.
you're diving into the
Oh,
paparazzi, and they're like, "Who is this guy?"
yeah. And I lost my thread a little bit there. Fortunately, I have a gorgeous wife,
There you go.
and she kind of brings the average up. So, yeah. So my experience with Hollywood has always been pretty positive,
Yeah.
and the downside is like sometimes things don't happen.
Right.
Um, and then the night agent experience was just like uniformly wonderful.
Right.
The production company was wonderful. The Sean Ryan was so
Hmm.
gracious. Sent me the pilot script. Everybody was really welcoming on set. Had me at the premieres, and just a wonderful group of people. And it's something I miss in writing. It's really fun to go hang out
Yeah, it really is.
because it has that sort of like downtime,
Hmm.
um, that kind of theater kid downtime where, well, because I don't have any responsibilities really. So I
Right.
just go and
You
I
don't have to
just get
deliver
to
a
like
line.
banter in the downtime. Yeah, yeah, except for the cameo. And
Except
then
for the cameo, yeah.
I was sweating. Yeah. So yeah, so everybody's been like uniformly wonderful. And I know I'm really fortunate to have that experience.
I think it's kind of funny to bring up Jack Carr again, but he gets a cameo in every series, but they kill him. So I was way behind watching his newest one, Dark Wolf, and I was sitting on the couch a couple weeks ago, and I'm just watching the episode, doing my thing, and all of a sudden I'm like, they just killed Carr. So I texted him, and I was like, I just spied a New York Times bestseller getting capped. So
Every season. Oh yeah, that's great. And then there's a fun thing, and I put this in the method where um they're often looking for people to play dead.
yeah,
And it's hard to play dead.
it is. Yeah.
And then one of the production assistants who was showing me around, one of the writers' PAs in Vancouver when I was up there for the first season, he's like, "Oh yeah, I forget how it came up, but he's like, sometimes you want to get the folks who do living statues,
Hmm. Yep.
who dresses like the Statue of Liberty. They make the best corpses."
Because yeah, they're good at not moving and
Yeah.
staying
So there's
still.
a
Absolutely.
little joke in the method. I worked that in and gave a shout out to my PA buddy.
Very nice. Well, people need to get the method and then they can find that little Easter egg and they can see what you're talking about. So where's the best place for them to get the method?
The method, or wherever you get your books,
Wherever you get your books.
yeah, you can, my website, if you want to, my website, I do giveaways and things. So if you go to my
Okay.
website, you can sign up for the newsletter there. And I do Instagram and X and Facebook and all that if they want to, stay on top of the new books and that stuff. And they should, yeah, check out the method. And then the Night Agent, we're going to the premiere next week for season 3.
Season
And
3.
then season 3 drops on February 19th.
Well, one thing is with all the negative you hear about, whether it's the writing process or getting it adapted and all that, is Matthew, you are an example that it can happen. The only way it doesn't happen is if you don't put in the work and finish a product.
Yeah, just finish. Just get your head down. And then if it's bad, you can just move on to the next one. But yeah,
Go on to the
finish
next.
things. I think it might be like a Neil Gaiman advice or something. I don't know where I read it, but it's like write, finish things, and show them to other people.
Yep. Good methodology. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It was great chatting.